Before we start on the antisocial behaviour stuff that I know you are keen to talk about, I just want to get your reaction to the sting, the undercover expose by the anti-Brexit group led by donkeys. Matt Hancock, Kwasi Kwarteng, among other MPs, saying that they would work for a fictional company for £10,000 a day. It's within the rules. Does that mean we should care about the rules?
No, I think it's important that, first of all, that we make sure that every MP operates in a way which is transparent. So when members of Parliament do work which complements the work that they do in the House of Commons, then it's absolutely vital that we know who's paying them, what they earn, and that's what the register is there for. I think it's also appropriate as well that the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner has the opportunity to investigate and to look at any activity that may cross the line. On this occasion, I think it's pretty clear that things that were offered and things that were considered were within the rules. But inevitably, all of us will reflect on this and think the first duty of a Member of Parliament is towards their constituents. And ultimately, the really important thing is an MP delivering for their constituents? Is a Member of Parliament doing everything they can to put public service first?
Is the other issue that they didn't seem to do much due diligence on this company, did they, given that it was non-existent?
Well, again, the individuals concerned will have to answer for themselves. It is the case that there are members of Parliament who do work for a variety of organisations that complements what they do. So, for example, Maria Caulfield, Health Minister, also works as a nurse. Dan Poulter, previously a Health Minister, works as a doctor. So it is possible to combine additional activity with your responsibility towards your constituents, but each individual MP must judge for themselves. Is what they're doing something that they can defend? Are they making sure it's transparent and within the rules? But above all, is it the case that they're putting their constituents first?
OK. Now, you're announcing measures to tackle antisocial behaviour today. What's the big idea?
Well, the most important thing here is to recognise that antisocial behaviour can ruin lives. So crime has been reduced, neighbourhood crime has down as a result of the steps that we've taken over the course of the last 13 years. But it's still the case that in too many areas, people's lives are blighted by the type of activity that in particular means that town centres become no-go areas, that parks and public spaces become despoiled. So what we're saying is we want more visible policing in those areas that we know are hotspots for antisocial behaviour. We want to have faster justice, so that the yobs who've been responsible for doing damage in a particular area repair damage more quickly. But also, we need to nip this problem in the bud right at the very beginning. We need to recognise that some of the reasons that fuel antisocial behaviour are essentially to do with the way in which young people are sometimes denied the support, the structure that they need, and therefore we're looking in particular at making sure that there are other activities for young people, and I'm working with the Education Secretary, of course, to look at truancy and persistent absence as well.
Faster justice?
Yes.
So the reports say these punishments could be turned around in 48 hours.
Yes.
There'd obviously be no trial there, not much chance to defend yourself. Who actually decides on the justice? What's the
Police and Crime Commissioner.
See, I just wonder, do we really trust the police right now? Because it feels like this is an elevated role for policing. In the papers today, just to pick two headlines, strip searches of children as young as 8, shocking findings of my report into Police Keep Me Awake, says the Children's Commissioner. Would my son have been assaulted and held in custody if he wasn't black? Louise Casey review, of course, found institutional misogyny and racism in the police. Do we really want to give them a bit more power here?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital that we uphold the role of the police in maintaining law and order. Now,
Do we trust the police?
You're absolutely right to say that the Casey report was shocking. What it revealed about the Metropolitan Police is unforgivable. And the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, is taking steps to deal with that. But ultimately, we do have to make sure that our police force can command confidence, but can also be in a position to ensure that we have order on our streets. So we need to do two things. We need to make sure that where the police have either been poorly led or have been operating in a way that has forfeited or risked public trust, that there is visible change. But the overwhelming majority of police officers are people with a sense of vocation. They join the police because they want to make a contribution to their community, they want to deal with crime, they want to uphold an orderly public environment. And that's what we need to do. So
if you are going to try and really get this kind of fast justice out,
yes.
Right, Do you commit to checking that it's not disproportionately impacting people from, for example, black backgrounds?
Yes, and so one of the reasons why we're piloting this approach in different areas across the country is that we believe it's absolutely right to surge police numbers in these areas and to have faster justice. But the pilots are intended to ensure that we can learn. So if for any reason there are ways of operating that are not those which command public confidence, that we can change. And you are absolutely right as well. It's vitally important that the police operate in a way which is entirely free of prejudice. I should say, however, that it is very often people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds who are disproportionately the victims of crime. So it is important to recognise that if we want to have a safe society for every citizen, in which people, whatever their background, whatever their circumstance, can feel safe, that we need to take action. And antisocial behaviour in particular is a problem in communities that have been overlooked and undervalued in the past. It is part of levelling up to ensure that people can feel that their high streets are safe.
Is the government planning to ban laughing gas, nitrous oxide?
Yes. I think any of us who've had the opportunity to walk through our parks in our major cities will have seen these little canisters, these silver canisters, which are examples of people not only despoiling public spaces, but also people taking a drug which can have a psychological and neurological effect, and one that contributes to antisocial behaviour overall.
So this would be under the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act? Would
Yes.
it be what, Class A, Class B, Class C? How would it work?
I don't know which class we would attribute to it, but we want to make sure that the sale and use can be restricted for its appropriate purpose. We can't have a situation, we mustn't have a situation where our parks, our public spaces, become drug-taking arenas. And that is why we need to crack down on new manifestations of drug-taking, and these laughing gas canisters are an increasing scourge, and one that's been reported to me as a constituency MP.
The Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs recommended against making it illegal.
Yes.
They said the current evidence suggests the health and social harms of nitrous oxide are not commensurate, very nice word there, with control under the Misuse of Drugs Act in 1971. I mean, you've done drugs yourself. You've admitted to taking cocaine on several occasions. Are you really going to give people a criminal record for taking laughing gas?
Well, we want to make sure that we deal with the scourge, and it is the case that we need to be clear that there are types of activity, particularly types of activity that cause distress to others in public, which are unacceptable. And, of course, it's absolutely right that we uphold the law in this case. Yes, the advisory committee have offered their advice, but ultimately it's ministers who are responsible, and we believe collectively that it is absolutely vital that we deal with this scourge. And in the same way, one of the things that we're also doing is making sure that there can be extended drug testing of people who are responsible for criminal and antisocial activity. We need to deal with it.
Do you not think there is a bit of an issue where people may look at politicians who've taken drugs themselves and thinking, hang on, it's a bit hypocritical?
No, I think it's because I've learned.
OK. What have you learned?
That it's a mistake, worse than a mistake, to regard drug-taking as somehow acceptable.
OK. Now, Keir Starmer said a Labour government wouldn't treat cannabis as a low-level crime. He said there's a family in my constituency where every night cannabis creeps in from the street outside into their children's bedroom. It's not low-level, it's ruining their lives. Do you think that cannabis use is a low-level crime?
No, I don't believe it's a low-level crime. I think that it is absolutely right that people see the law upheld. And the experience of so many, not just with neighbours who are behaving in an antisocial way, but in our high streets and in our public parks, is that they see the law being flouted, and that's not acceptable. We do need to make sure that in public spaces, order is maintained, and it's just not, to use the word they used earlier, commensurate with people feeling a degree of pride in their community to see it being used as a free-for-all when it comes to breaking the law.
And now, tomorrow, just to move on to other topics, the MPs are going to be voting on the illegal migration bill. People who arrive in the UK on small boats being deported, including to countries like Rwanda. Now, some rebels in the Conservative Party are backing an amendment that would ban British judges from using legal precedent from the European Courts of Human Rights. Is that realistic? Is it something the government will consider?
Well, the most important thing to do is to make sure that we pass this legislation. We've got to stop the boats. And the Conservative Party recognises that the only way in which you can have confidence in accepting new people into this country, as we have so generously with the Homes for Ukraine scheme, with Afghans, with British nationals from Hong Kong, is to control our borders. And I know that the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, who's been working incredibly hard to make sure that this legislation works, has been talking to MPs who may be in a position to ensure that every aspect of this bill works. In my experience as a minister, it's always a good idea to talk to backbenchers to make sure that your legislation can achieve everything that you hope it might.
How do you feel personally? I mean, I asked this question to Oliver Dowden as well. How do you feel personally about the idea of children, many from very difficult backgrounds, may have legitimate asylum claims, being sent to Rwanda?
I think it's absolutely right that we uphold the law. One of the things that we're doing alongside making sure that we stop the boats is also establishing safe and legal routes for asylum seekers.
Do you think more safe and legal routes should be created then? Because, as you and I know, it's not that easy to find a safe and legal route from most countries in the world.
Well, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have made clear that we want to establish those routes so that we can take a number of people
Should there be more, then?
Well, Parliament will decide how many people we can take.
What's your view?
Well, my view is that we should. I was involved in establishing, creating and maintaining the Homes for Ukraine scheme. I think we should show compassion to people who are fleeing persecution, but we also need to be clear about two things. There is a limit. No country can have an infinite number of new people arriving, but it's also the case that we need to demonstrate that we have effective control of our borders. The people who are exploiting the situation at the moment are criminal organisations trading in human misery, and we need to make it clear that their business model will be broken.
Now, you, of course, were Education Secretary, so I'm quite interested to get your view on the recent scrutiny of Ofsted in the wake of the very sad death of the head teacher, Ruth Perry. Are Ofsted inspections placing too much stress on teachers?
Well, the first thing is, obviously, when you're talking about circumstances where a clearly public-spirited, talented, passionately committed person has taken their life, you have to have respect for her example and her family. So it's important not to, I think, be too political when we're reflecting on her passing. I do think, however, that Ofsted plays an absolutely vital role in providing information about how schools are performing well, which we can learn from, and which schools are not performing well and therefore need help and intervention.
There have been some people who said that the you get 4 grades, right, and that's too much of a blunt instrument. It should be more nuanced than that.
Well, I think that those grades are important, but there is one issue which I do think we need to reflect on and look at, which is that if a school is found to have failed its safeguarding criteria, then that is what is called a limiting judgment. And if a school is found inadequate in that area, that means it's inadequate overall, even if it has strong teaching and learning and its other areas are good as well.
So what is safeguarding? Just explain what is that?
Safeguarding is the set of rules that govern the well-being of children within the school, the health and safety, the protection and so on. I do think we need to look at the way in which a limiting judgment, as it's called, a technical term, means that a failure in one area means failure everywhere else. But that is not a criticism of Ofsted. Ofsted do a great job. The Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, is someone absolutely committed to supporting teachers to do better. One of my worries is that some of the people who are attacking Ofsted object to transparency, are anti-high standards, and what we need to do is to recognise that education has improved in the last 13 years, and the role of Ofsted under successive chief inspectors has been absolutely central to that.
Now, Westminster has been gripped by Boris Johnson this week. He was giving evidence to the Privileges Committee about whether he deliberately and or recklessly misled Parliament over Partygate. Now, back in 2016, I will never forget the moment when you pulled the plug on supporting Boris Johnson's leadership campaign and effectively torpedoed his campaign by launching your own. And I just want to play what you said at the time. So this was back in 2016.
I so wanted that plan to work. I worked night and day for it. But I came to realise this week that for all Boris's formidable talents, he was not the right person for that task.
When you listened to Boris Johnson this week, did you think that you were right all along?
No, I served as a member of Boris's cabinet during the time that he was Prime Minister. I think that as Prime Minister, he did a very good job for this country. I think that the way in which he managed to ensure that we left the European Union and that the turmoil over Brexit at last came to a conclusion, the way in which he handled COVID and oversaw the vaccine rollout, the fastest and most effective in Europe, and also the courage that he showed in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine, all of that shows that as Prime Minister, he was someone who was operating in a patriotic and public-spirited way. And so I will continue to feel affection and respect for Boris Johnson as Prime Minister.
I asked Greg Hands, party chairman, this week if Boris Johnson was a man of integrity. He didn't say he was, he just said that he was a great campaigning asset. Do you think he was a man of integrity, or is a man of integrity?
I think that Boris is someone who puts the country first, yes.
So you think he's a man of integrity?
Yes.
Now, there's just one last thing that I want to ask you about. Matt Hancock's WhatsApps.
Oh, yes.
Because a few of the exchanges that appeared in the Daily Telegraph between you and Matt Hancock were, to be completely honest, I'm not actually sure what adjective I should use to describe them, but we can just have a quick look at some of the exchanges between you and the Health Secretary. This is you to Matt Hancock there. Lots of emojis, lots of affections. Why do you love Matt Hancock so much, then?
Because he was doing something, I think, on that particular day that I admired. He was throwing himself into the battle against COVID. Of course, it's the case that there are all sorts of critiques of how we as a government handled COVID, and we need to reflect on those. But I still believe that, notwithstanding other events, that Matt was someone who, in that role, was working incredibly hard to deal with the virus and its effects. And I think that...
Were you taking the mickey out of him slightly here? I just wonder.
No, not on that occasion.
This is all very serious, right?
It was an expression of earnest admiration at a time when he was working incredibly hard. You are right that sometimes when you're sending a WhatsApp, people may not recognise that you're sending it with a twinkle in your eye, but on this occasion, I was admiring of what Matt did.
Okay,
and I think the key thing is, you know, in politics, we can often have individuals who attract criticism and obloquy, but when people were working, as Matt was, so hard to try to do the right thing, then we're all part of a team that offers support.
This is my favourite. What are we trying to achieve in this meeting? Letting people express their concerns in a therapeutic environment before you and I decide the policy. Quite a lot of meetings like that?
I think you could probably say that that was written with a twinkle in my eye and my tongue in my cheek. From time to time on WhatsApp, I suspect even at the Sky Newsroom, though it will be the case that people send messages which are intended to provoke a wry smile rather than necessarily provoke action.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.